How did it come to be that Roger and On came together?
Or Roger said, hey, I would love to get involved. That, hey, that's fantastic. But something like a classic sports star endorsement, us giving money to you, that's not really on style, because we've always been growing out of the community, and that's not in our playbook. But how about not us giving you money, but you giving us money and becoming a co-investor and a co-entrepreneur together with us? And to our surprise, Roger said, yes, that's what I'm going to do.
David, I am so excited for this. As we just said, I am one of the biggest On fans, so this is a personal highlight for me. And thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, Harry, thanks a lot for having me. Great to be with you.
Now, I've been following the On story for years, and it's just such a great one. So I want to start at the beginning with 2010, two other co-founders. What was that co-founding aha moment for the three friends?
It was actually 2009 and a rainy morning when Olivier, my co-founder and duathlon world champion, triathlete, he said, hey, I have this amazing idea of a new running shoe. And invited Casper and me for a test run. And so it was a morning, it was raining. He had some wet shoes because he had already had done some testing, and he had shaved off a pair of running shoes and glued rubber pieces that he had gotten from cutting his garden hose underneath these shoes, so these hollow elements. And with Casper and I had said before, hey, why do we let Olivier invest his hard-earned athlete money into a crazy idea? But then we took this shoe for a spin, and it was just an amazing sensation.
Can I ask, why was it an amazing sensation? What did it feel like?
So Olivier, obviously as a triathlete, had a lot of time to think while running, and he asked himself, hey, I go for these training runs on very cushioned shoes, but then when you compete, you literally run in shoes that are called racing flats. And so they're very hard and you feel it the next day. Wouldn't there be a way to engineer it that I have best of both worlds in one shoe? And that was the breakthrough idea. And what these hollow elements do is they give you a lot of cushioning when you land, but then they fully compress and they give you this flat surface so that you can push off with all your energy. And so that made this sensation of being super soft, but also super responsive and explosive when you push off. And that got us. So because we also had been a generation that first discovered suspension bikes, full suspension mountain bikes and carving skis. And in both of these occasions, it was a revelation where you felt, hey, wow, this changes skiing for me, or this changes biking for me. And so on this morning, we had that pattern recognition of, hey, this could change running for me.
Okay, so it's, you have this revelation that this can change running for you and for millions of other people. What do you do then? Like, how do you make the first shoe, and what was that process?
That was a little bit messy at first because we were full in exploration stage. And so we weren't sure about it yet. So it was this unsure, confused phase that is the start of innovation. So we went out to athletes and had them test shoes, just kind of to give us confidence as well. And many of them said when they stepped into the shoe, they said, wow, that's different. So that's the word different, that's what we always heard. Casper went off to talk to first specialty running retailers, so the hardcore running mom and pop shops, a little bit outside in the village where all the serious runners go to get the best advice. And I was actually boarding a plane to Asia because a friend of mine had given me the contact to somebody who knows somebody who works in a shoe factory. And so we didn't come from the sports industry, so I went there and learned how to make shoes.
What did you learning how to make shoes in Asia? Like, how was it? You rock up to a shoe factory and you're like, I've got an idea for these new form of shoes?
Yeah. Yes, it was pretty much like that. And of course, they said, hey, we have hundreds of guys that are coming to us telling us that they have a new idea for a shoe. And you have a especially complicated one because you want to do these hollow elements, which later became Cloud Tech in the shoe. And it's impossible to make these molds because putting holes into a sole, you need kind of tooling that puts almost sticks into the sole. And how do you get the tooling out? And it's complicated. And so first I had to convince them that it's possible to build a tooling like that.
How did you convince them?
You know, I brought them some prototypes that Ollie had done and asked them to step into the shoes. By the way, Olivier and Casper were doing the same. Olivier with athletes, Casper with first retailers. And that was always the replication of the aha moment that we have had on that rainy morning that happened for many, many other people. And in fact, I came back then with first prototypes out of the factory. And then we sent it to the largest sports expo, ISPO in Europe. And they called us 2 weeks later and said, hey, you won the ISPO Gold Award, which is the innovation award for new sports innovation. And a week later, Tekla Lorup called us. We didn't understand her name. And she just told us in broken English on the phone, hey, somebody has given me these shoes and I just ran from Germany to the Pope on a peace run. And it was the best shoe ever. So we kind of understood she probably ran quite a distance. So she must have to do something with running because we didn't understand her name. Then we found out that she's a marathon world champion. And so a lot of things happened at the same time. That was January 2010, just a few weeks after we had founded the company.
And so were you doing this full time at the time? Were the three of you full time? Had you put your own money in? Did you have supplies? When she got given them, could you send her more?
So 2009 was kind of our exploration phase, probably second half of 2009. And you know, we had well-paid jobs, kind of very acclaimed kind of positions in companies. And so, first of all, we had to convince each other that we actually do this. And there's no better way to do that than on a long hike in the Swiss mountains. And that's exactly what we did. And while we were climbing the mountain and the view got better and better, we had a realization. And that is, if you're coming out of Switzerland, you're coming out of one of the richest, safest places on the planet. And that sometimes can be an inhibitor because then you're in such a safe place that you probably don't take risks anymore. And so we asked ourselves, if we can't take a risk of doing something crazy like this, who can? And that was the challenge to ourselves. And so after that, I quit my job. Casper quit his job. Olivier stopped to do his athlete coaches, and we really fully committed and then fully started at the beginning of 2010.
When you look at kind of that start in 2010, we hear about winning the award, the incredible marathon runner who's like globally renowned, loving your product. It seems like the dream start. What were some of the really hard elements in that first year or two that you go, oh, that was hard?
Hey, it was this dream start, but then of course reality sets in as well. And so some of the retailers told us at ISPO, because they already wanted to write orders, they didn't realize that we were just showing them prototypes that we just gotten out of the factory. Hey, if you can't deliver in June, you don't bother, because then my running season is over. And so I boarded a plane right after ISPO to make sure that we have shoes in June. So pushing out that first batch of probably 2,000 shoes.
And you were paying for this yourself at that point? You were funding it yourself?
No, at that point, not anymore. Kind of for the first flights in 2009, we all paid ourselves. But then we had put all our money into the company. And so I always flew from Zurich to Dubai to Hong Kong, and then took the train because that was the cheapest option. And so pushing shoes out, but then also for Casper and Olivier, who visited a lot of retailers, getting that first conversation and opportunity to present the shoe was hard. So their tactic was to call a retailer up, the local running shop. Hey, I just happened to be in town. What's your size? By the way, I just have your size with me. Can we go for a run over lunch? So it was really one by one, the hard groundwork of getting your first wins.
I mean, my favorite is that, oh, I just happen to be in New York today. That is fantastic. Can I ask, when you look
What
at...
a coincidence.
What a coincidence. And your size, it's just here, baby. My question is, the brand is so synonymous with the design in particular. When you look back at the early design and kind of, bluntly presenting that to retailers, expos, was that difficult in terms of customer education, telling them about this fundamentally new shoe that looked so different?
It's interesting because parts of the DNA of On, biggest part of the DNA of On is, of course, running and performance and this innovation company. But from the very beginning, design was part of the DNA because that's part of my background and also of Thilo's background, our head of design, who was with us even before we started the company. And we had asked Thilo because he's a product designer, not a shoe designer. He had never designed a shoe. And so we felt that's a good fit with us because we also never were in the shoe business. So let's completely break conventions. And so what we did is this outsole, which is very much visual technology. So if you see the shoe in a shoe wall, you gravitate to that. So that's definitely a win. But then we also decide to do something unconventional in the industry. Let's forget about all the decoration and kind of the lines and the shiny things on the shoe to yell, I'm a performance product, but let's completely strip it down. Let's do form follows function, where we make it very minimal and very much in a Swiss design tradition. And at the beginning, people told us, don't do that. That you need the running shoe bling because that's going to put you at a disadvantage. And we did it anyhow. And so at first, it probably was almost a little bit an inhibitor, but it made it to a very distinctive design. So people gravitated to the technology. It was very unusual. It was a different aesthetic. So at the end, it helped us.
You mentioned that your Thilo and the product design background he had and your lack of experience, respectfully, in the shoemaking business. When you think about the benefits of naivety, often we're told about entrepreneurs, it's good to be naive. But then bluntly, if you were starting another shoe business today, I'm sure you would know a lot more and be a lot more efficient in the way that you started it. How do you think about the benefits of naivety when starting businesses?
I think what we lacked in knowing about producing shoes and selling shoes, we probably brought some different background to the table. So Casper and I spent a lot of time in marketing and in advertising. I spent a lot of time in one of the leading design companies, Vitra. I had built just out of university a digital marketing agency, one of the first ones. And so we brought Olivier, the amazing athlete who has a direct connection from his big toe to his brain. And so if you give him a shoe, he knows exactly what has to be tuned. And so we brought an eclectic Casper who wrote his thesis about sports marketing. So we brought a lot of an eclectic mix to the table. And sometimes it's probably good to have an eclectic mix, but then also that naivete that you're mentioning, because if you know what's coming your way, you wouldn't have started in the first place.
Can I ask, how did it go?
Which is not exactly true, because if we know what's coming our way today, we would have started in the first place.
I'm sure you would have done, David. My question to you is, when you think about, going back to those one-by-one regional stores, we're in the same place, what was the inflection point where it really started to take off? What was that moment where it went from one to boom?
It needed quite a bit of perseverance and patience as well. So our experience was the first 2-3 years in a market are hard, because if you really want to build that out of together with athletes and out of core running, you seed a lot. You convince a lot of very dedicated small retailers. You talk to people. You get influence in the running community. You do a lot of test runs. And so until you hit a certain scale, it probably takes 2 to 3 years. And then after 3 years, we were seeing in our small home market really that hockey stick moment where it's taking off. Fortunately, we had decided at the very beginning that we're coming from a very small market. Switzerland is 7 million people, so that's a greater New York area or probably a greater London area as well. And so there's no option to build a global sports brand out of Switzerland. And so we were pretty much a global company from the start. So we were in Europe after ISPO from day one. Then in the second year, we went to the US. We established our US presence. In the third year, we went to Japan. And so we built very much on with a global team and with a global DNA. And so we built kind of that opportunity to grow into different markets almost one by one and have this hockey stick moment coming your way every year again, just in a different market. And so it's been a great foundation for us.
The US in year 2 is a very big decision. It's a big investment to go into such a big market. And respectfully, in year 2, you didn't own the market in Europe or didn't have such a dominant position like you do today. What was the decision-making process behind the decision to move to the US so soon in year 2?
It was very clear to us. If you want to be a sports brand, you have to be in the US and you have to be firmly rooted in the US, as you have to be in many other countries like Japan, UK, so some of the biggest running countries. And so we wanted to do that from the very start. And we also spent quite a bit of time in the US in our previous lives. So we knew the country, we had some connections, so we just ventured out there.
And then tell me, so that's a massive decision, number one. How do you launch US? It's a big market. It's a crowded market. How did you approach the launch strategy for respectfully on an unknown Swiss European brand?
It's essentially not so different than from any other countries. If it's been the same grassroots approach that we had in Switzerland, in Germany, in France, in the UK as well. We just go out and start with some of the most important influencers. In the US, you probably don't go out to the whole country at once, but you select your metropolitan area. So for us, it was, for example, at the very beginning, it was New York, and then other parts like San Francisco, LA, Miami, Portland, of course, where our office is in the US. These were then attached and we started to work with the local community.
Can I ask, is it enough to just get it in running stores? Because once it's in running stores, you need people to engage with it. You need the retailers to want to continue to buy it from you. How do you turn it's in store to sales and converted customers?
So there were probably two other important pivot points for us. So we also, being very much a digital native company, we decided in year 2 as well, hey, let's really partner with the best retailers because we feel it's much more effective if they talk about the shoe. If we talk about, there's been so much said about running shoes by so many different brands. If we go out there and say, hey, now we did the most amazing running shoe on the planet, nobody will believe you. So you need some allies. And that's been very much also the incredible role of our partners. At the same time, we also went out and said, hey, we also want to have a direct connection to our community. And so we built our first website and our first e-commerce presence. And so we were very happy that in the first month, I think we sold 50 pairs of shoes back in 2012, I believe. And so we launched this D2C presence as well. And that was right the inflection point when, of course, social started to rise. Then also the pivot from desktop to mobile. You remember iPhone 2008. Mm-hmm. So that was only 2-3 years after the first iPhone launch. And so we fully leaned into that to make sure that we also have the digital connection, apart from all the physical stuff that we were doing. So we were hosting at least 300-400 fun runs, community runs all over the planet. But at the same time, we also built that digital connection.
This is so cool for me. It's such a fan. I get to ask all the questions I want to know. My first here would be, you said about influencers earlier. Do you just, in the early days, did you just send them famous marathon runners, famous triathletes, famous athletes? Did you just send them shoes? Did you ask them to wear them? What was that process like?
Yes, absolutely. And of course, Olivier is fully ingrained in that community. And so he called all his friends, and his friends called all their friends. And so we made sure that some of the best athletes were in our shoes. And I remember a moment I think it was 2013, so 3 years into the journey, where Frederick van Lierde, one of the top talents and contenders for the Ironman triathlon on Kona, or for the World Championships, he wore our shoe, and it was a prototype. So Olivier was always cycling behind him on the running route, because Olivier was afraid that the shoe is going to fall apart, but it didn't fall apart. And Fred won the World Championship in triathlon in our shoe, and was on that podium wearing the Kona crown, which is the trophy of the World Championship of the Ironman. And so that was an amazing moment for us that probably stands for how we connected to the athlete community and really built on out of core running and together with athletes.
Can I ask, were you ever worried that the alignment to such brilliant athletes would alienate normal people, the general public? You become known as I think bluntly, Hoka are often known as a running brand just for very extreme ultra marathon runners, as an example. Or were you worried about cornering a market too niche into real athletes who are pros, not the general public?
No, I think we weren't, because we always knew that you have to come out as an innovation brand and as a sports brand, you have to come from the core. And if we would have been afraid of that, then we would have definitely be put at ease probably in 2014, because we at some point we saw Variety magazine, and on the Variety magazine there was the Oscar winner, the 3-time Oscar winner in tuxedo on the red carpet of the Oscars, and he was wearing the cloud. And so that was for us a sign that now On is crossing over into popular culture.
That is such a cool moment. Can I ask, when you think about the movement into clothing as well, that seems like a big decision too, because you go from a beloved footwear brand to, hey, we're going to do clothing as well. When was that decision, and why did you decide to make that decision?
It was quite as many things at On. It was quite organic. So at some point we just said, hey, we hate to run in gear from other brands, and so Tilo and I started to work on a first little capsule collection of apparel, just a few pieces, 10 pieces, the perfect running short, the perfect t-shirt, the perfect lightweight jacket. And so we presented that internally, and then we decided that we start selling that. And I think it's a natural progression for a sports brand. Now we're much more serious about that, because we feel if you're building a global brand, you want to happen on the full body, and you also want to bring the capability of what your technology and innovation team can do to the full body. And so the same team that brought you the On shoe is also bringing you apparel.
What was the hardest element of launching clothing alongside the very successful existing shoe brand?
One of the hardest part is, I think, the innovation part. What we wanted to have was pretty clear, and also all the detailing and the cuts. What was hard is sizing, because shoe sizing itself is hard, and we learned a lot about shoe sizing, and then apparel sizing is even different. And then do you build for the typical what body shape are you building to? Because you can't be too wide at the beginning, and so getting the sizes right. The second thing is finding the right partners to sell apparel, because selling apparel is a completely different thing than selling shoes.
How so? Sorry, I'm fascinated. Why is it so different?
Shoes you put on a wall, and shoes have a volume, and so you can put them on a wall and you understand the product. If you just hang apparel on a hanger, it's not going to sell.
So what did you do?
So you have to understand how you present apparel, how do you create almost scenes, how do you combine it? You're not just buying one apparel piece, like in shoes, where you probably buy one pair, but you're buying a full look. And so you have to have the right partners who understand how to create that universe around apparel, put the right looks together. We also had to learn it not just with our partners, but also on our website. How do you present apparel? And so that's, I think, something that we're still learning.
On the retail partner side, I'm fascinated. That's not an easy thing to do. Hey, we want to create a scene in your already very busy store. We want more real estate. We want to make it come alive. How did you convince retail partners to give you more space, more time, more energy than hanging on the rack like all the other brands?
Often, I mean, these are long partnerships that have been growing over time. And so with partners like, for example, Nordstrom or now Dick's or Foot Locker, or then also tastemaker doors like Kith or Beams. These partners, of course, know how to sell apparel because they've done it for ages. But they're very invested in our brand as well because they just saw On growing incredibly fast, one of the fastest growing brands over the last decades. And so they're very committed to make apparel happen for us as well. And we partner with them.
When did you decide to do your own stores? Because we mentioned before the show, I love your store in London. When did you decide that actually we can own this experience as well and we should do On retail experience ourselves?
We had a perfect timing. We decided that probably a little bit more than a year before COVID. And so we selected our first location in New York, and we came up with the concept, and then we built the store and we launched it during COVID. So that was what you call a soft launch, I would say, because it was really in the middle of it. But hey, it was actually great because we could get into it, learn, and we could also connect because there was almost no tourist traffic to New York. So we also partnered very much with the local run community. When COVID was coming to the end and people were coming out again, and you remember the running boom. So a lot of runs, community runs started at our store. And so we partnered with the community. Now every day runs start at the New York store. But now, of course, you have the full traffic back. And so we felt it's a very unique experience that we also developed. And so we're now coming to other cities around the world.
What have been your biggest lessons in what it takes to make retail work so well?
You know, probably the biggest question that we had when we developed the retail concept is, why would you go back to a shop to buy shoes and then also apparel? Why would you not just do that on a website? And we realized that often if you go to a sports store, that you don't spend so much time with actually the people of the brand and of the store, because it's about, hey, what is your size? And then somebody disappears for 5 minutes somewhere in a locker room or in the back room and comes back with the size, and then it's probably not the right size. And then this person disappears for another 10 minutes. And then after 20 minutes, you're there with a lot of boxes, and it's the first time that you speak to each other. And so our thought process was, how can you reinvent that? That's again, at On, we always try to do things a little bit differently. And so we created a huge piece, which we call the archive. And you see every shoe of on that big archive. It's landed like an object from outer space in that space. And then there's the magic move, which is with a secret button, you can open this archive and you pull out the drawer, and then of each of the shoes you have one size, all the sizes of that shoe. So within seconds, that shoe is on your feet. And then if you decide that this is the model, then of course we get you a fresh pair from the back room. And so things like that, how can you innovate on retail, were important for us, and it's been so rewarding for us to see that it really works. So people love it, because it's maximizing the interaction time and not the transaction time.
Can I ask, how do you think about the things which are great to be different on, like that amazing experience, versus things that are fine the way they are. We don't need to change that. Maybe it's the way that people pay in stores. Maybe it's the bag that they carry out. But it's like, you know what's existing works. Let's leave that versus no, we can innovate. How do you think about that?
On has a very strong culture, and so we have 5 spirits that are important to us, and one of these, probably my favorite spirit, is the explorer spirit. And so it's the spirit that you try to discover something new, and you set sail, and you don't call back the next day. So it's very much, hey, you embark on that journey, and so we also very much empower our team to think for themselves and to assemble a great team with different skill sets, because you need that on an explorer boat. And so many things, I think, at On are always resourced. So we always question ourselves. At some point, you probably find out, hey, the solution that we find is probably not so far off from industry convention. But in many cases, we find, hey, there's an opportunity to do it slightly different, or sometimes radically different, like in the core technology, which is the first engineering play actually in the shoe industry, not a material play like normally in better foams.
Can I ask you? You mentioned the explorer mentality there. I love that. How do you think about, like, bluntly, everything looks like it's just worked, David, if I'm being totally honest. What have you explored on that hasn't worked? And how do you think about how long is the right amount of time to give something before deciding that it doesn't work?
You know, I mean, we had some difficult moments in the early days. So when we started out and we also scaled production, at some point, I remember very clearly in 2013, our production partners called me and said, hey, David, we have a little problem. Just our factory went broke. So they're shut down, and all the materials for next season's production are already in there, but they haven't been assembled. And so that was pretty much a near-death experience. And I told them on the phone, hey, you have to find a way to get the raw materials out so that we can assemble somewhere else. So they called me back the next morning and said, hey, we found a way. Somebody climbed over the fence and got the materials out. And now we're assembling in another factory. That was not exactly my assignment. But in hindsight, I'm probably pretty happy that they didn't completely understood me right, but it's something that only an explorer would do to save on, essentially.
I mean, that is one hell of a moment.
That was an incredible moment. And so it also made, because back then we were probably something like 30 people, and a lot of things were on Casper's, Olivier's and my shoulders. And we realized we have to bring other very experienced explorers in together with us to just create the bandwidth. And that's probably been a realization that I would wish I would have known from the very beginning. Don't go too far alone and risk the company, but bring great people in. And Mark and Martin, who are now the co-CEOs of On, joined us back then, and they took a lot of the responsibility, especially when it comes to finance, operations, execution, and they have been brilliant in scaling On with us together.
How do you know when is the right time? Often we hear this kind of idolization of founders. I totally agree with you, by the way, in terms of bringing in great people and working with you. But founders are idolized today, and go the distance. You need to be CEO, David, until the company is, 1,000 years old. When is the right time for founders listening to maybe think about bringing in the co-CEOs that you mentioned who are amazing?
I mean, in our case, when you know, because I mean, if things start to fly around and break, you pretty much know that you have to bring other people to the team who complement you, and that's been great at On anyhow from the very start, because it was 3 founders from the start, so it was not one founder; it was a partnership from the beginning. And that very much informed how we built the team as well. On very much operates as a partnership. And also, if you look at our senior leadership team now today, these are roughly 10 people. Half of them are female. So actually all the regions D2C is all in female hands at On, and we just were able to bring an amazing group of people together at On.
Can I ask you, there's two more topics that I think are really fascinating and that we haven't touched on yet, but we mentioned kind of funding earlier. You didn't raise venture funding in the way that we see today. Why did you not decide to raise venture funding first?
Well, venture funding came a little bit later. We had the privilege that we had built in previous years before On quite good connections. Switzerland is small, so we had good friends who were able, together with us, to put a little bit of money into that starting jam jar. And so that got us off the ground. And they were great. They were actually even helping operationally, partly in the business. So I remember particularly when with one of our early investors, with Eric, I was dressing mannequins at one of the first running events in Austin. So they were very hands-on, and that was a great time where we had some external co-explorers together with us, also Philip. And so these were the foundational years. But what was great as well was that our community around us also helped us to be very connected to the US, also to the tech investor community. So we had actually quite a bit of tech investors who loved the shoes, who came in very early into On. And then a few years later, Stripe, a venture capital firm from New York, who's and they are greatly connected at the intersection between consumer brands, but also tech. So very much in the innovation space as well. They were our first true VC investor.
You mentioned VCs loving the brand early and being big advocates. You also have a very well-known advocate in the form of Roger Federer. When I put it on social that you were coming on the show, many comments were about Roger. How did that happen? Just tell me the story there. I'm too interested. How did it come to be that Roger and On came together?
Again, as so often in our journey, it was quite organic. So we saw him posting from Paris on his Insta account in On shoes. And he said, wow, Roger now, and that he's not working with another company anymore. He seems to be a big fan of On. And some of our friends in Switzerland noticed as well. And Switzerland is a small place. So they said, hey, you should have dinner together. And this we did. So we met in Zurich in a little restaurant. Roger came in with his baseball cap deeply into his face. He brought a friend as well. And we just had a great conversation over that dinner. We talked about, of course, sports, about innovation, about technology, because Roger has a lot of history in especially in shoe development, but also apparel. We spoke about design as well, popular culture. So we felt there's a connection, and he extended a challenge to us and said, hey, could you bring your unique patented cloud tech to tennis shoes as well? So we met again 2 months later, and we showed him an outsole. We had a printed outsole that brought cloud tech in a hidden form factor into a tennis shoe. And 2 years later, he was actually doing his comeback in Wimbledon in the Roger Pro that had this sole coming to tennis.
And can I ask, how did he come to be a shareholder? Did you say, hey, we want you to be a part of this, like take advisory shares and be an ambassador? How did the deal come about?
So we said at this meeting in the lab, we said, hey, Roger said, hey, I would love to get involved. And we were super honored and said, hey, that's fantastic. But you know, something like classic sports star endorsement, us giving money to you, that's not really On style, because we've always been growing out of the community, and that's not in our playbook. But how about not us giving you money, but you giving us money and becoming a co-investor and a co-entrepreneur together with us? And to our surprise, Roger said, yes, that's what I'm going to do. And it has turned into a fantastic partnership and friendship, where he now probably spends 30 to 40 days per year with us here in On Labs, working on products, and we're completely aligned.
How impactful was it, Roger wearing it for the brand? Like, I think he's obviously, and you'll agree, done a lot for the brand. But like, was it a boom moment with Roger coming on board?
Yes, definitely. I mean, when we launched, so I remember we launched our collaboration with a big run through Central Park in New York. And of course, we were on morning shows, we were doing the whole tour, and it was exploding. Now, so Roger did an amazing, contributed in a very significant way to the awareness for the brand, and of course also there are millions and millions of people who love Roger. So one of the most loved sports stars probably on the planet, and so that did a lot for On. At the same time, Roger is also very committed to build our second sport, tennis, with us. But Roger is also very much interested in the core running space. So we also talk a lot about next running shoe innovation. So it's really, we work together as co-entrepreneurs.
Can I ask you, what's been your biggest observation or takeaway from working with Roger? As you said, 30, 40 days a year there. What's a big observation or takeaway from seeing him in action off the kind of court and actually in the lab with you 30, 40 days a year?
I think Roger comes as he's perceived publicly. So his public image is very much reality. And so it's just incredible to see how Roger is super, super humble, but at the same time super engaged. And he asks a lot of questions, which is great because that pushes us.
I love that. It's so lovely to hear. We mentioned kind of the increasing brand profile. Before we do a quick fire, I wanted to ask, brand is thrown around a lot, David, but On has a truly great brand, which is rare. What does brand mean to you in terms of what a brand is?
I think a brand in the core is a community and an idea. And for us, On has always been not just about equipment for better performance of your body, but we feel running, but also hiking, other sports are so much not just about doing something for your body, but they're doing something very much for your mind as well. I mean, I'm sure, Harry, then the last time when you went out for a run when it was raining, you probably have this few seconds of hesitation, should I go? But you're never coming back from a run saying, hey, I regret it. Because it was bad weather, because you're always coming back refreshed, a little bit more optimistic, probably a new idea, probably even a new small or even a big dream. And so that's part of that claim that we use, Dream On. So it's very much an condensation of our mission, which is to ignite the human spirit through movement. So we feel movement, running, and the spirit are very much connected.
Is that what you want people to feel? When people hear On and when people go into an On store, what do you want them to feel?
We want them to feel that we very much care about product and the innovation and the sports that it supports, but that it's more than that it's not just about reaching your new personal best, but that it's reaching the best of you. And so that it is about movement, yes, and about sports achievements, but it's very much about lifting your spirit as well.
You've gone through an incredible brand journey. What do you know now about brand that you wish you'd known back in 2009 at the very beginning?
We built the brand very much as a grassroots movement because we had to. So we had very humble and nimble beginnings, and that also we continue to do that. So we try always to operate nimble. Probably back then, we probably waited a little bit long until we started to invest into On being bigger out there and being also having this cultural relevance. And so the moment where we see you switch from building a grassroots level brand to then also building broader brand awareness, that's something that we probably should have started a little bit earlier. Now, Roger definitely helped, and we're very much working on bringing big moments to our community to also let the world know what we're trying to do.
Do you wish you'd raised a lot more venture capital or just capital earlier to invest in that? Or actually, do you think that you benefited from not having tens of millions of dollars to invest early and it was better to be leaner?
It's interesting. Our American friends always told us, you're so European, and our Swiss friends told us, you're so American. And so that probably describes our DNA right at the brink of that very well. So we always wanted to grow very fast, but at the same time, we wanted to have durable growth and be a profitable company as well. And so I don't regret at all that we always drove that line, because being a profitable company now and at the same time a growth company, I feel is very good for On right now.
We mentioned brands. I'm fascinated. You spoke earlier about the scene of running in the store and how you bring that to life. When you think about a brand that you most respect, other than On, obviously, what's the brand that you most respect and why?
If I would ask my friends at On and my team around me, that they would say, hey, David loves Apple. So to this day, all computers at On are Apple. And so I've been a big Apple fanboy from the very start. And I tell you why. First of all, I feel Apple did an amazing job in reframing what a computer is from the very beginning. So bring together the technical innovation with design and the human aspect of it. And if you think back, it unfortunately doesn't have it today anymore, but the breathing light on a laptop that indicates that the laptop is asleep. Is that tech or is it design? And so I feel it's right at the intersection. And so I think that's where magic happens. Same for scrolling on the iPhone. Remember that moment when you first saw the scroll on the iPhone? Is that now tech or is it design? It's that magic that happens. And then Apple. So I think that Apple built that combination, and I admire brands that are able to build innovation and technology, but then also that design layer on top of it to create magic. And then, of course, Apple built a great brand out of that as well.
Final one before a quick fire, but you mentioned that kind of the scrolling, you mentioned the breathing light. How do you retain simplicity in products with expanding features, with more breathability, with lighter weight, with why? How do you retain simplicity with time and with expanding features?
Hey, it's a big challenge as you grow. We as founders probably spend 40, 50 days per year in the lab. And together with an amazing team, we're trying to always shave off again as well. So how can we, first of all, you try to make it more features, bigger, better, and then how can you simplify down again? Because I feel that simplicity creates amazing products. I give you one example from the early days of On. So when we created the Cloud, still one of our most known shoes, an amazing engineer called Thilo, who's actually our head of design, asked, hey, couldn't we do a special lacing system that you don't have to tie? It's a speed lacing. And he invented the speed lacing system. And it's so simple and people love it. And that's a big part of the success of the Cloud.
I love that. I did not know that. That's so cool to hear. Listen, I want to dive into a quick fire because I could talk to you all day. So I'm going to say a short statement and then you give me your immediate thoughts. Does that sound okay?
Sure.
Okay, so you can have dinner with one person, dead or alive. Who is it and why?
That would be Cleopatra. Because I feel there's not so much space anymore on this planet today to really explore something that you've never seen. So meeting Cleopatra would, to a certain extent, also mean space travel to a place very distant, but which was big in innovation.
What do you know to be true that others do not agree with?
I feel 120% beats 80-20.
Unpack that for me. What do you mean? Going all in on one thing versus...
I feel doing something to perfection in many cases beats kind of optimizing for efficiency, especially when it comes to product. Not always true, but as somebody who's very much focused on product, I'm more 120%.
What have you changed your mind on in the last 12 months?
Probably on the future of technology for humankind and how AI is going to change our world.
How's it changed? That's a cliffhanger.
I feel just AI was a very, very abstract concept, and we always felt, hey, the more mundane tasks will be at some point automated through machine learning. And now there's this amazing pivot where we learn, hey, potentially some of the most creative functions will be disrupted through AI. And that's a 180 in a certain sense, and still grappling what that means for creativity as well, because we now have to think, how can we potentially not just be creators, but also great curators that orchestrate AI.
Tell me, if you could be CEO of another company for a day, which would it be and why?
Probably OpenAI. I would want to see what's coming.
I totally agree. Sam has a fascinating seat. If you could have one star adopt On as their shoe and brand of choice that hasn't yet, which would it be?
It hasn't yet. I already wanted to say Roger, because I mean that's been a dream partnership. So I would say it can't be one person, but it has to be the people who are really passionate about running and the running culture, but also very much in a creative sense, that should adopt On.
Tell me, who's your mentor and what have you learned from them?
I think the team at On has very much been my mentor over the last years. And we have a great culture at On, amazing people, and we challenge each other a lot. Also among the founders, the partners, the team overall. So I think we grow through that challenge. It's not always easy. So you also have to be willing to expose yourself. You have to be willing to let go as well. So it's not always easy, but it's a great mentorship in the team.
Penultimate one. You mentioned one near-death experience earlier when the factory shut down and went broke. What's another near-death experience for you from the journey which really stands out?
Actually, nothing. So On over the last years has been so rewarding and such a privilege to work with a team that is exploring and executing on so many dimensions. So we're ourselves amazed how this is working. And just to give you one example, when we were coming back after COVID, we just had built our office in Portland, but also our own On labs here. And we had our opening party, and we realized that we left the old office with 200 people, and then we moved in with 700 people. So it was 500 people that had never been in a physical space together. And just to see what an amazing job our team did to hire the next generation and the next generation that brings the same culture and mindset to the team, it felt, hey, this is the team that we know, despite the fact that we didn't know 2/3 of the people present.
David, final one for you. 5 years' time, where is On then?
Where is On in 5 years, Harry? On in 5 years will be a global sports brand that still very much resonates with our core community, with runners, but also has built a second sport called tennis, and is happening for you on the full body. So not only shoes, but very much also apparel, because we want you to go out, to run, to move your body, but also to elevate your spirit. So that's the mission, and we hope that together with our community, we can achieve that.
David, listen, I have so loved doing this. As I said to you at the start, I have been the biggest on brand advocate, not quite as famous as Roger Federer, sadly, but it has been a joy to do this, to tell the story, and you have been incredible. So thank you so much for joining me, David.
Harry, thanks a lot. Let me know whenever you're near. I will let you know when I'm near. And then as the two countries that are not part of Europe, we should definitely meet.